We're here today at Dinan Engineering's headquarters in Morgan Hill, California, with the man himself, Steve Dinan. Steve says this is pretty much the coolest shop in the United States, and we've done a tour, and I tend to agree. There's a lot of fun toys around here. We've got a 99 M3 here. Would we be doing the same kind of tech inspection if it was a brand new car, let's say with 6,000 or 7,000 miles on it?
You have a brand new car like this M5 right here, only has a couple thousand miles on it. You check the air in the tires, you make sure the fluids are full, and you go have fun. You have to assume that the manufacturer knew how to put it together when they built it, and it hasn't had time to have anything go wrong with it yet.
Yes, it's really just a visual inspection.
It really is.
First thing we're talking about in the miscellaneous area is the gas cap secured, and does the thing work right?
The gas cap and the oil filler cap are made in the same way. It usually has a couple of tangs on it. Sometimes they'll be threaded with a rubber O-ring here. You have to worry about the tangs being bent and the rubber O-ring being cracked. And when we put it on, we want to make sure that it actually snaps into place tightly and has some resistance when it goes on, so we know that it seals.
Now, one of the items here is no exposed electric wires.
Yes, on a modern car, the cables have gotten so high-tech, really they don't require much inspection like they used to on older cars. Unless the car's been in an accident or somebody's modified the wiring in the car, chances are that's going to be fine. Now, if you have an antique car, I highly recommend that you look it over very carefully, because antique cars a lot of times will have hand wiring run through them.
Right.
Taken to the track, they can be rubbing against sheet metal, it could be very dangerous.
All right. The next question is about loose objects in the car or the trunk. Those things can be a big problem. I'll bet you've got experience with that too.
I do, yes. I had a student once who had a coffee pot underneath the driver's seat, and when they braked, it rolled underneath the brake pedal. When they went to brake for the next corner, they stepped on the brake pedal, the pedal hit the coffee pot. He hit the wall. So
that's not good. Okay,
not
no,
good.
We don't do that. No, we don't hit walls that hooked on driving. Okay, no loose objects in the car. And the battery bolted down with 2 bolts.
Yes. And a lot of times on new cars too, they'll have a plastic tray like the BMWs that'll fit down inside of, rather than having a conventional bracket. But it should be secured properly, because if it goes upside down, the battery swings around again, it can short, and it can spray acid over things.
So obviously, we should be checking coolant and oil.
Yes, I want to make sure the coolant level is filled up all the way and the oil level is full too.
Okay, so now we've got a 7-year-old car here. She's a sweetheart, but it says in here, check hoses and belts.
Yes, check hoses and belts. Not only just check the hoses and belts, but honestly, if they have a significant amount of time on them, you should just change them. Hoses and belts will crack from the inside out, and it's very hard to see those cracks, and sometimes they'll just burst, and then you'll put water all over the racetrack. So here at Dinan on a street car, we recommended 8 years and 80,000 miles. You put belts and hoses on it. If you're going to go to the racetrack, we probably recommend a little bit earlier than that, maybe around 50 or 60,000.
Okay, makes sense. Now, some of the safety equipment you take for granted, but we should look it over.
Sure.
Seat belts in good condition.
Mm-hmm. You want to make sure it retracts smartly, doesn't stick. You might want to put some lube on the seat belt retraction mechanism as well as the latch. If the car's been in an accident, you want to make sure that belt's been replaced. Because the belt will get stretched and damaged and could potentially fail on you. You want to make sure the belt's not frayed as well.
In fact, we should point out that since coaches will be riding in the passenger seats, we need to check that for both front belts.
Yes.
One item that I wouldn't have thought of is just to check and see if the headrest is functional.
Yes, David, not just the headrest is functional, but actually adjusted properly with your helmet on. You should get your significant other or friend to sit in the passenger seat with you in your normal driving position and see how far away that headrest is from your helmet. What we're trying to avoid is a lot of velocity before the helmet touches the headrest, so we want it actually fairly close.
Okay. And now we've come to wheel bearings. It says there should be no play.
That's correct. On a newer car, the wheel bearings are one piece. They've been that way since the middle 80s. So on a newer car, if it has any play at all, the wheel bearing's bad. You just grab the wheel on the top and the bottom with the car suspended in the air. This one has no play at all, so this is in great shape. In addition, on pressure, there's an optimal pressure where the tire performs the best, and on most street tires, that's between 38 and 42 degrees hot. You want to do your first track session starting out about 34 psi, come into the track, and then as soon as you park the car, get out and check your tire pressure. If they're a little bit higher than 42, you want to bleed a couple off. If they're a little bit low, you want to put a couple in. And that way you can adjust it throughout the weekend to get that optimal range.
Let's talk about the rotor and the brake pads. These are disc brakes, obviously.
Yeah, these look in real good shape. There's no grooves in them. There's not a big dish in them like they're worn. If there were, you'd have to take a micrometer and measure the depth. There's actually a depth printed on the outside of the rotor from the manufacturer.
Oh, okay.
On the brake pads, we want to have a minimum of thickness of material equal to the metal backing. And actually, we prefer to have at least half the brake pad if we could. These look relatively new. In addition, we want to inspect the brake lines and all the fittings to make sure there's nothing loose or hanging off, no fluids coming out. We also want to make sure the shock absorber is not leaking any fluid, that it's dry in here.
Got it. Obviously, we're interested in being sure the brake fluid reservoir is full and the brake pedal is firm. Are there other things that we should be looking at under the car while it's up in the air?
Yes, Dave, we definitely should check the suspension bushings. When you run the car on the racetrack, if you load it up very hard in the corner, if the bushings are cracked, the car might handle funny.
Okay.
You also want to check the motor mounts to make sure the motor's secure. It makes the car a lot easier to drive.
There may be folks that have not seen what a torque wrench is before. This is a wrench that actually measures how tight a bolt gets, right?
That's absolutely correct, and we want to make sure we use this because if we torque the lugs in equally, it will warp the brake rotors when they get hot and cause a brake shimmy.
Not good.
Not good.
Okay, so what kind of poundage or torque do you use on this wheel?
Most alloy wheels are around 75 to 80 pounds, depending on the manufacturer. So
Okay.
this one's set at 75, and you want to make sure you use a crisscross pattern so you seat the wheel equally. So we start on this side over here. And it's all set.
A lot of folks ask me what modifications they should do before they even come to the racetrack. How would you answer that?
Well, it's a difficult question for me, obviously, since I'm in the car modification
Understand.
business. But I agree wholeheartedly. People need to learn how to drive a car before they make extensive modifications, particularly to the engine. I would recommend a suspension modification, though. Usually most modern BMWs, and that's what we're talking about here today, but other brands as well, will have a fair amount of understeer for safety reasons. And you can get a lot more handling out of the car and get it so you can balance the car on the racetrack and really fine-hone your skills if the car will respond the way you need. So I highly recommend a suspension kit on your car, maybe some wheels and tires, and of course the brakes will take a punishment on the racetrack, so I'd highly recommend going there first as well.
Okay. As opposed to going right in and throwing more horsepower at it.
Well, that's what most people want to do, is they want to put a lot of horsepower into the car, and then it just makes the other things more overtaxed.
Got it.
You want to make the car safe and handle well first, and then add the power.
Obviously, we're going to run the car really hot. I'm assuming that you would suggest a top-tier fuel like Shell V-Power?
Yes, definitely, Dave. You want to run the highest quality fuel that you can, like a Shell V-Power, to protect the engine from detonation when the engine gets hot and it's being run hard.
What do you say we button it up and drive it out of here?
Sounds good, Dave. And one more thing I want to show you about a BMW is how to close the hood.
Oh, yeah?
You always want to use the BMW logo so you don't get any fingerprints on the paint.
Nice job.
Thank you for coming.